Are you planning to open a business and lease commercial space? I'm Dale Willerton, the Lease Coach, author of Negotiating Commercial Leases and Renewals for Dummies. You can get a complimentary copy on the Lease Coach website. Before the Lease Coach starts the negotiating process for a client, we ask these top 10 questions of the landlord's listing agent. Question number 1, we ask the agent, who really is the landlord? Is it a mom and pop landlord? Is it a real estate investment trust? Or even a developer? When I used to work for landlords, I worked for developer landlords. They would acquire a piece of land, they would design a plaza or a shopping mall, they would pre-lease it, then they would start building it, and before you know it, the property would be finished and they would then sell it and flip it for a profit. My point is, you may not have the same landlord 2 years from now that you have now if you don't find out more about who they really are. Question number 2, ask the listing agent, how long has this landlord owned this property? That can be really telling and relevant. If the landlord developed or built the property 15 or 20 years ago and has held on to it, they're going to have a strong track record. Their mortgage is going to be paid down. There may not be any mortgage at all. But if the real estate agent tells you that another landlord had purchased it, let's say a year ago, that landlord may have a pretty big mortgage to pay. And with a big mortgage, they expect you to pay big rents. So you want to know if this landlord has indeed owned this property for a long period of time. And you can even ask the real estate agent, how long have you been the listing agent for this property? That can be really revealing. I spoke to an agent just last week, and when he was sending me a lease proposal, there was no landlord name there. And I said to him, well, if you're the listing agent, how come you don't know who the landlord is? Well, it was just purchased and they haven't given me that information yet. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's important to know how long the landlord has owned that property. Question number 3, I ask the listing agent, where is the landlord physically located? Are they in the same city? Are they in the same state? If not, it can affect the level of service you get from the property management perspective. Some landlords manage their own property. They're very hands-on. They're in the same city. Other landlords are 5 states away, and they use a for-profit third-party property management company that doesn't really care. They're just collecting the rent and paying the bills and making sure the property runs. If having a good relationship is important to you with your landlord, you need to know where they are, how accessible they are, and will you be able to see them once in a while. Question number 4, is the property manager local? In some cases, the property manager is not in the same city or the same state, and that can affect the level of service you get, because once you become a tenant, all your interaction will be with the property manager. So you want to ask, is the property manager local? Can I meet with them? Will I ever see them? I remember one particular case where I was negotiating a lease renewal for one of my clients, and when I called up the property manager, I made a point. I wanted to find out what she knew about this tenant. And I said, have you ever met this tenant? No, she said, I've never met this tenant in person. And she even admitted that she'd never been to the property. She lived, 1,000 miles away, and she'd never been to the property, but she was the property manager. So how hands-on the property manager is can affect the level of service you get when you need them, like the roof is leaking or there's parking lot problems or vagrants or things like that. Is the property manager local? Question number 5, what is the building's history? The listing agent may have only been the listing agent for the past 6 or 12, 18 months. They may not have much history on the property, but you want to ask anyway. They can find out from the landlord. So the first thing you want to say is, what's your history with this landlord? And the listing agent's going to say, I've had the listing for 8 months, I've done one deal, and the landlord bought this property 2 years ago. Okay, that's some good history. Let me give you an example. My wife and I built a beautiful home, and just down the street, a developer created and built a very nice plaza with 10 or 12 tenants, anchored by a Starbucks. There was a chiropractor, a gym, a dentist, that type of thing. But over the course of 20 years, 80% of that property turned over, and some of the units turned over multiple times. The restaurant space turned over at least 4 or 5 times. I remember the gym lasted less than a year. This is important for you to understand and to learn, because if there's a lot of turnover in the property, it may be more challenging for you to have a successful business in that property as well. The less turnover, the better the property is going to be for you. Question number 6. Who is actually leasing the property? This is not always self-evident, but sometimes you can drive up to a property and there's a for lease sign in the window, or there's a for lease sign on the side of the road. Okay, that means the landlord's given the listing to a listing brokerage. However, the property manager could be doing the leasing, or the landlord could be leasing the space themselves. You want to find out about this before you get into the actual negotiating process. If you're not talking to the right person, you may find that you waste weeks and weeks of time until they pass you on to the actual leasing authority, and then you have to start the process over. Question number 7 is one of my favorites. I asked the listing agent, who were the last 2 tenants to move out of this property? Now, more often than not, the real estate agent doesn't know. They've only had the listing for 6 months or 18 months, so they have to go back to the landlord and find out for me. But this is very important, because if the agent comes back to you and says, well, the chiropractor moved out 6 months ago and the cafe moved out about 12 months ago, then I want to refine that. Did the chiropractor go out of business, or did he just move down the street to a different property? Did the cafe do the same thing? If they're still in business somewhere else, I can phone them up and I can say to that chiropractor, hey, by the way, you moved out of that plaza. We're considering leasing it for our space. Why did you move? Now, he might tell you a nightmare story about the landlord, but there's a pretty good chance he'll just say, oh no, it's a very good landlord, it was a good property. I just needed more space and there was no space for me to expand. He has no grievances. Okay? There's a difference between tenants who go broke in a property and never move and never relocate, versus the ones that just moved out and took their business somewhere else. Question number 8 that I asked the listing agent, who were the last 2 tenants to move into this property? This is very important information, because I can call those tenants up. I can walk in. He might say to me, well, the dentist moved in 8 months ago and the cafe moved in 2 years ago. All right, I know who I want to reach out to. These tenants are going to be able to tell me how their leasing process was with the landlord. Do they have a good relationship? Does the landlord and property manager take care of them? All of this information is out there if you are willing to go and talk to these tenants, as I often do for my clients. Question number 9. Who is the anchor tenant and how secure is their tenancy? You don't want to sign a 5 or 10-year lease in a plaza just to find that the grocery store closed or went out of business or moved down the street. This does happen all the time. And unfortunately, grocery stores can afford to keep paying the rent. So there's a big hole in the plaza. The landlord can't put in a different grocery store, but now there's 10,000 people less a day coming to that particular plaza. You want to find out how secure the anchors are. And an anchor can be a cinema, it can be a large gym, a grocery store, it can be a hardware store. They're not all created equal. A sportswear anchor is not as attractive as a grocery store anchor. So grocery stores do tend to be great anchors in plaza, providing they stay. Question number 10, very important. Is the building for sale? You have to ask that. Sometimes properties are listed quietly for sale, and the tenants inside the property aren't even aware that they're going to have a new landlord pretty soon. This doesn't mean you still can't lease space from them. It's just you want to understand the process and who's going to be coming and who's going to be going. So is the property for sale? And one of the ways to ask the real estate agent about this is to say, how many properties does this landlord have? Are they selling any of those properties? Are they acquiring new properties? And often I'll get a response like, well, no, this landlord doesn't sell anything. They're holders. They buy a property, they renovate it, they hold it and keep it forever. That's kind of the dream scenario that you want in most cases. These are the top 10 questions that I always ask the listing agent for a property. So you're about to lease some space. You're going to need some help. Step number 1, go to theleasecoach.com. order a complimentary copy of my For Dummies book. It will blow you away. You will be surprised how much you did not even think about. You can reach out to the Lease Coach for a complimentary 20 to 30 minute phone consult with myself, and I'll talk you through the process and give you some additional information in case you want some help from a professional lease consultant. At the Lease Coach, we only work for tenants. We only get paid by tenants. At the Lease Coach, we help tenants.